Hello, BookTube. This is Alan. This is going to be my partial read for the month of July. I'll probably pick up some more books to read for July, but also some of my readings that I did for the month of June. I haven't made a video in a while and thought I'd check in and tell you what I've been reading, what I've read, and yes, and what my plans are for July and the coming months. So on for June, I finished Blindness by Henry Green. I enjoyed this novel. It's very short. It's about a gentleman by the name of John Hay, who has begun while he was at Eton, and he has a student with literary errors. He starts with an excerpt from his diary, and then brimmed with excitement and reflection, and then hears about life in literature, and then a freak accident robs him of his blindness. And the second part of the novel, after his diary, goes into part 2 called Chrysalis, and then you have and there's a couple of passages here that I really enjoyed, because I am no deafness in both ears, 60% loss of hearing in my left ear. I've had 2 operations on my left ear, and I have 3 operations on my right ear, in which there is 40% loss of hearing. There's a nerve deafness, and so when somebody speaks onto my left side, I cannot hear them at all. I would have to turn to my left, turn my good ear, my right ear towards them, so I can hear them. And so it's very hard when I was in school, so I could not catch some of the words because I could not, what the instructor was saying, because of the deafness. I'm filming this outside, as you can see, and let's see how this goes. Let me adjust the camera here for a minute, so you're going to have light fading in and out. Let me see, there's a couple of passages here in the book that I really enjoyed. Let's see if I can find him. Oh, John's having a conversation with June, and he really liked June. Is kind of like a caretaker of John, and John says, "No, of course not, June. Here we are in the wood. Do you feel the hollowness of it? For the trees crowd about us, and the branches roof us and slyly, with their sly noises that one can just hear. And we seem to be in another world now, for the cart that is creaking along the road outside is so faint, floating through the trees that urge the sound gently along as they are tickled by the wind, so that we might be on our way to some dark and dangerous spot." There's a couple of other passages in the book. Let's see if I can find them real quick. I wrote them down. This one's pretty long, and so very indulgence. There's so many things to do, all the senses to develop, old acquaintances of childhood to make friends with again. Sit still and be stifled by the blackness was wrong. He had done that long enough. Temptation was so great. The darkness pressed so close. And what sounds one heard can only at first be converted into terms of sight and not sound. When a blackbird fled screaming, he not only been able to see it as a smudge darting along, he had tried in vain to visualize it exactly. Now he was beginning to see it as a signal to other birds that something was not right. It was the feeling that one has in the dark when something moves, and when one jumps to turn on the light, and the light leaps out through the dark. Why translate in terms of seeing, for perhaps he would never see it again, even in his dreams. They might be of sounds or of touch now. The deaf might dream of a soundless world, and how cold that would be. There was a story of a deaf old man who had forgotten that the breaking of the waves at sea on the beach made sound. He must not go deaf. One clung so to what senses were left. But sight was not really necessary. The values of everything changed, that was all. There was so much in the wind, in the feel of the air, and the sounds that nature lent one furlough only to take it away. Or was there nothing in all this? Why did everyone and everything have to live on illusion? That mummy was really there, and as the media and everything, but one couldn't not let that go. So this is a good book. Enjoyed it. The next one I read was actually in an e-book. This is my Little Red book. It's similar to Miles' Little Red book, but it's a little bit different. And it just gives me the list of e-books that I need to read that I requested and received from publishers through my NetGalley account and my Bookscribe account. And so I finished a book called The Road from Raqqa. The Road from Raqqa comes out on the 21st of this month. It is, let me check here just a moment. It is by Jordan Riddick, and it has about two Syrian brothers from the city of Raqqa. It's R-A-Q-Q-A, and Jordan Riddick talks about the history of Raqqa, a small, indistinguishable city close to the Euphrates River in Syria. Talks about the Assad, the president of Raqqa, or dictator who actually obliterated his own city just because there were a couple of Muslim brotherhoods there. And he was on the United Nations chastised him about that. The city was Hama, H-A-M-M-A, and two brothers, one named Riyadh, the other named Bashir, both from Raqqa. One leaves, Riyadh leaves to America, becomes a United States citizen, and marries. The reason why he left for America, even though they were taught in the schools in Raqqa that the United States was an evil country, like evil empire, and he took an American government course in Raqqa and learned that the United States is the only country in the world that can remove the leader, the president, through impeachment. And he was impressed by that. So he left for the United States. He founded he started his own business called Raqqa Cafe in Tennessee. It's R-A-K-K-A. And it was visited by Ricky Skaggs, a country singer. And it was on the Guy Fieri's food channel. Diners, Divas and Dives, I believe is the name of it. And it's on YouTube. I looked it up and checked it out. And yeah, it's called Raqqa Cafe, R-A-K-K-A. And he learned how to cook from his grandmother and his mother, and the spices and everything else. And he goes back to Raqqa because his brother Bashir had come to America along with his family, his mother and father. and their mother and father, excuse me. And Bashir was deported back to Raqqa thanks to, well, after 9/11, thanks to President Bush's enter and exit regulations where they deported 1,400 Middle Eastern people because of their last name, not because on their origin, and not because they had ties to terrorism. And he goes back, and Riyadh goes back to Raqqa because he thinks there's a revolution going on, when in fact there was actually ISIS in there. He said that we're here to liberate you, when in fact liberation, you cannot liberate anybody without violence. So it's a very, and you have the Raqqa being sieged by Syrian troops, ISIS troops, Russia, American, all these different cities, until finally the city is 85% uninhabitable right now. So it's a good book, The Road from Raqqa. The next book I read was Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. And I like the cover of this book. Pretty cool. And seeing when this came out. This has a lot of copyright dates on it. And let me see. 64 was this Bantam book, paperback book. Mass market came out. I didn't like the book. Not at all. Takes place in 1928 in a small town in Indiana, excuse me. So we got a little boy named Douglas Balding, and a lot of things happened during the summer. A lot of things. And that's the problem in the book. The Strange World of Greentown, Illinois, there was a junk man who saved lives. Yeah, I said Indiana, excuse me. Illinois. There was a pair of sneakers that could make you run as fast as a deer. There was a human time machine. There was a wax witch that could tell real fortunes. And there was a man who almost wrecked happiness by building a happiness machine. Yeah, that's the problem, because you have too many things going on in this book. There is no structure, there's no plot, there's no narrative, there's nothing. There was too much magical realism in the book. Now, if you could take one of those, like the Wax Witch that could tell fortunes, and make a story, the entire story about that, that would be great. But adding so many things in here destroyed the book. I said on my Goodreads page that people that like magical realism like this are the same people who would drink cyanide and believe everything's going to be perfect. The next one I read is a book called Murder in Old Bombay. It was an e-reader, and I cannot remember the main character's name because I DNF'd the book. And the book comes out in October, I believe. Let me see here. My little red book. November 10th is the publication date. And I got the book because NetGalley sent me an email saying, oh, first 1,000 people can get this book without you requesting it. And so normally when you're on your NetGalley, you have to request a book, and the publisher will see that request and either accept or deny your request. But this time they had a book in which you didn't have to request it from the publisher. You'll just get it. You'll just get the book. So it's an e-book, Murder in Old Old Bombay comes out on the 10th of March, 10th of November, excuse me. But I didn't have March. That's where I got the March mixed up because that's the author's last name. The book takes place, of course, Old Bombay, which is British colonial India. And it's told in first person. The main character is a Sherlock Holmes aficionado. In fact, he believes he's Sherlock Holmes. And one part of the book, stories about his investigation of this alleged two women had fallen from the university library tower, which is 200 feet above the ground, and the courts have already had a suspect, and the suspect was released because there was no evidence. But the husband and one of the deceased comes to this guy and said, "Oh, we need you to investigate." So he goes, "Well, Sherlock Holmes wore a disguise and such story, so I'll wear a disguise to go investigate the university library." And then a couple of chapters later, he goes to another situation where he has to investigate, talk to people. He says, "Oh, Sherlock Holmes wore a disguise," and he names the same book that he named earlier. And yeah, that's the problem. It's a repeat all the time. It wasn't edited very well. There's one time in which he is beaten up for some reason, but he never told what the reason was. I guess he was going too far, getting too closer to the evidence. And there was another time, a couple of chapters later, he gets beat up again. Apparently he didn't read that Sherlock Holmes got beat up twice in the story. So it wasn't very good. Really didn't have a plot or structure to it. And it just meandered throughout the story. It just repeats a lot of the same thing, same genre. Let's see. There's so currently I'm reading a book which was shown on Steve Donahue's channel. It was Henry Kissinger, which is I have to write comes out on 18th of August. Let's see what the full title is. Henry Kissinger and American Power by Thomas Swetson. This is by Farrar, Straus and Giroux. It comes out on the 18th of August. And so far, I don't get it. The guy says in the very beginning, the author says in the very beginning that he wanted to write a story about Kissinger for a new audience. Why? And that was my question. Why? He didn't show anything new. He didn't show it, and he hasn't shown anything new. The only thing that has been shown is that Kissinger changed American foreign policy, and to which Vladimir Putin was asked in 2017 about the so-called Russian involvement in the 2016 election in the United States. And Putin said, well, the United States hasn't changed their foreign policy in the last 50 years. Why should we get involved in their election? And the past 50 years brings you to Henry Kissinger, and is starting with the National Security Council. So he wanted to change that. And Kissinger is very hawkish, as I noticed. And he went with the, so far it's not been very good. read. I have two other books, one called Lost Pianos of Siberia, which I need to read, and that's by Sophie Roberts. That comes out on August 4th, and it's by Grove Atlantic. And another one is called The Book Collectors, and that one comes out on the 20th of August, and it's and it's about Syria. Go figure. Abandoned Syrian rebels and the stories that carried them through the war. And it's, well, wait a minute, it comes out the 20th of October. So I need to change that. They changed the publication date on that. So I need to change that. There's another book that is on that I downloaded. And that is the, see if I can find it here real quick. And that one does come out in August, and that's the August 18th, and that's the history of magic, witchcraft, and the occult. I looked at the book, and the book is basically a encyclopedia of the history, of course, the history of magic, witchcraft, and occult. It goes all the way back to before the Common Era. And it just takes you to the Greeks, to the Romans, prehistoric, to the Roman Catholics, the Templars in there, and it takes you all the way up to modern day. So and it's a encyclopedic point and a lot of pictures in it. I might get this one on a physical copy because it's mostly a sort of a reference. It's not very detailed in explanation. So I'll probably get that one on physical copy on that one. So that's it for the that's it for the ebooks. Physical copy. What I'm going to be reading, currently reading John le Carré's Smiley's People. I picked up a John le Carré's novel, the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and only got a couple of chapters in before I put it aside. This one is very good. I'm really enjoying this one. And this edition by Bantam Books came out in 1980. 1980, and about page 130 out of 388 pages, so about a quarter. About a quarter, almost a half. So, that one. And I'll be reading Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. And this edition, this is Valentine book edition with printed in 1981, mass market, and it has a wraparound cover, which is pretty cool. And I believe this is the movie tie-in cover with Omar Sharif. My parents loved the movie and also loved the song Somewhere My Love. And so you have, Dr. Zhivago. I'll be reading this one this month. And I'll also be reading Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. I've never read a Jane Austen novel, short story, or anything by Jane Austen. So this is Jane Austen month. And it's very good to get involved in the topics of each month, because I got involved in the reading a mystery or detective story back in, I think it was March, and I read 5 of them. And I don't read detective or mystery stories, but this one was so I thought I'd try one, and this is a Jane Austen novel, Sensibility, This is only about 330 pages, and this is by the World's Oxford University Press. And so this is came out in 1990. Oh, let me go back to the Dr. Zhivago, because there's interesting, this edition. There's interesting back here, in the back, they have the poem of Zhivago. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So he has some of the poems in here of Zhivago. Oh, it's one of Paul Burrell. How interesting. $2.50 for paperback. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. I'm going to be reading, currently reading actually, off and on, Ostkrieg, Hitler's War of Extermination in the East. This is by Stephen G. Fritz, and this is the University Press of Kentucky. Stephen Fritz is professor of history of East Tennessee State University and the author of Frontsoldat and the German Soldier of World War II and Inkauf, Soldiers, Civilians, and the Death of the Third Reich. A couple of interesting things in here, and that the author points out is in his preface. Here's a little something short. Contrary to belief in many in the West, Hitler did not blunder into the war in the East. For him, the right war was always that against the Soviet Union. For to him, Germany's destiny depended on obtaining Lebensraum and solving the Jewish question. Both of these, in turn, hinged on destroying the Soviet Union. Which of these aims was more important? Given Hitler's view, it would be artificial to attempt to prioritize or separate them. For him, the war against Jewish Bolshevism and for Lebensraum was comprehensive and of the same old cloth. Now, the war in the East is not very well represented in a lot of World War II authors. They sort of maybe have a paragraph or two and basically dismiss it altogether. But one of the things Nazi Germany had a problem with is resources. Before the war, they were importing 70% of the oil, and when the war started, Britain blockaded the oil from reaching them. Also, the food sources, they ran out of food. In one of Himmler's diaries, he said that people were milking the cow at one end and eating the cow at the other end. So their attempt to, if you look at the map, if you look at a map of Germany before World War I, you can see how the German Empire stretched a long way, and even into Poland, which didn't exist at the time, up until the Soviet Empire, which kind of fought against the German Empire during World War I, and you can see what resources they had. And then after the Treaty of Versailles, they didn't have any resources. They didn't have any oil, nor did they have any food. So the attack the Soviet Union was attacked for the oil that the Soviet Union had. And towards the end of the war, at the end of World War II, they had a lot of equipment, motorized equipment, was just sitting there because they didn't have any oil to run them. Hello. The Second World War was not won or lost solely on the Ostfront, but it was key while the scale of the fighting there dwarfed anything in the West. In retrospect, the disproportionate nature of the Ostkrieg is striking. Roughly 8 of every 10 German soldiers who died were killed in the East from June 1941. In no single month of the war did more Germans die in the West than in the East, and the only month that came close was December 1944, when during a quiet period over 10,000 more Lancers fell in the East than on the other front. The Red Army, at the cost of perhaps 12 million dead, or approximately 30 times the number of Anglo-Americans, broke the back of the Wehrmacht. Total German and Soviet deaths, military and civilian, numbered about 35 million, compared with less than 1 million for Great Britain and the United States. At times, indeed, the Ostkrieg often seemed more murder than war. That it took the murderous regime in Europe's history to defeat its most genocidal certainly tarnishes Western notions of the good war. Nonetheless, Stalin's alleged observation, England provided the time, America the money, the Russian the blood, contained a great deal of truth. There's a very interesting, and Hitler actually wanted the Britain to join them, the British to join him in defeating Bolshevism. And this is true. That's what this author says. It says, if Germany pursued a pure continental policy and avoided any challenge to Britain's colonial commercial interests, which Hitler believed a great mistake of German governments before 1914, Britain might even aid in the destruction of Russia. Indeed, through the 20s and 30s, and in the first years of World War II, he persisted in the belief that Britain would ultimately be an ally of German-dominated Europe in the eventual struggle with the United States for world domination. And it's interesting that after the war, well, less than a year after the war, Churchill gets up and says, about the Iron Curtain, about communism. Apparently, during the war, he's acting like Don Corleone, saying you keep your friends close and enemies closer. Here is a very interesting quote here by this author. Well, it's not a quote, but a very interesting paragraph by this author. His chief interpreter, Paul Smith, perfectly captures Führer's mood on the early evening of 3rd September 1939. Having been summoned to the Reichschancellery to translate the British declaration of war, Smith described the funeral scene. After I finished, there was total silence. Hitler sat there as if petrified and stared straight ahead. He did not rant and rave. He sat in his seat completely quiet and motionless. After a while, which seemed like an eternity, he turned to Ribbentrop, who kept standing at the window as if frozen. What now? Hitler asked the foreign minister, with a furious gaze in his eyes, as he wanted to indicate that Ribbentrop had misinformed him about the reaction of the British. Goering turned to me and said, if we lose this war, may heaven have mercy on us. So that was, Wednesday is going to be a pretty long video. I'll make this last one real short. I have a lot to say here. Sorry about that. And Wednesday I came home and there was a package for me at about 11 o'clock at night. When I came home, there's a package in my dresser. I go, I didn't order anything. And I opened the package up, and this was in there. This is Tsarina. This is a novel by Ellen Alston. This is from St. Martin's Press. And I read the little sheet here. It says, "Dear reader, congratulations on winning an advance copy of Tsarina by Ellen Alston." And it's going to be published on October 13th of this year through the History Reader. I had no idea that I got this. That I actually entered the contest or something. Before there was Catherine the Great, there was Catherine Alexandria, the first woman to rule Russia in her own right. This is a rich, sweeping narrative of a rise from poverty to power, about great love and compromise, about war and bitterly fought for peace, about people in constant transformation. It is also about utter ruthlessness, great compassion, and the price one is willing to pay to live. So it's a historical fiction novel, and this is Ellen Alston's debut novel. It's a little good for her. And she was born and raised in the Kenya Highlands. She worked for the news anchor for Bloomberg TV. She works as an author and journalist for international publications like Vogue, Standpoint, and CNN Traveler. She lives in London with her husband, 3 sons, and a moody fox red Labrador. This is her debut novel, as I mentioned before, and the hardcover is 480 pages, out for $27.99, and ebook is $14.99, audio $32.99, and CD $57.99. So yeah, it's an advanced copy, and I enjoy reading this one, see how it goes. Well, that's it, and thank you very much for listening. Sorry it won't have been too long, and take care.